just don't lie about why you're doing stuff.
Everybody flinging around accusations that everybody's lying is a very dangerous trend to go down.
There is a lack of transparency about why they are taking the decisions they're taking.
I think there's a pattern of the government not being good at explaining why they're doing things.
It's really pissed people off. Financial advice from St James's Place sponsors electoral dysfunction. Hello and welcome to Electoral Dysfunction from Sky News with me, Beth Rigby.
Me, Ruth Davidson.
And me, Harriet Harman.
Now, hello everyone, it's raining outside but we're cosy in here. Now Harriet, I just want to check in with you because your corridor velocity and political mood, which I'm now obsessed with, and about how quickly MPs are walking around Parliament, I think we've created a new level of this game, or this observation rather, because there was a photo shoot that went viral this week. And Harriet, I'm not going to ask you to describe it, but I do want you to look at it. Ruth, can you describe it to everyone?
Yeah, so there's a picture of David Lammy and he looks utterly defeated. He's got his hands on a table in this court and he's got his head, like his forehead, just lying on his hands. And he's impeccably dressed. His suit looks sharp. You can tell that he's really got a nicely ironed shirt underneath it. But he just looks utterly done in, just completely defeated.
This photo, and I'm looking at it now, if you go on YouTube, you'll be able to see it. We'll pop it up there. But this photo, I think it's kind of how I feel for the entirety of December, actually. It's kind of Lammy with his, as Ruth said, like his head on the desk, thinking, God, is it time to stop now? But actually, this is from a photo shoot. He did an interview with The Times where he was actually talking about the criminal justice system and some of the changes that he's going to make as the Justice Secretary. And in a probably candid moment, they've caught him. He might have been having a laugh with them or something, you don't know. But Harriet, when you look at that picture, how does it make you feel? Is it like 1,000 worrying photo opportunities flashing through your mind?
Well, I just think it just makes me feel how unfair the situation is, because the narrative is, oh, politicians aren't themselves, they're all guarded, they're all overthinking things, they're not being natural and relaxed like ordinary people. But the trouble is, you have to be guarded, because if you have one unguarded moment, snap, and then that's actually out there forever and a day. And you can't win, because if you're all buttoned up and restrained, then they accuse you of being, all straight-laced. But if you just be natural, then they pick something, put it out of context, and then forever and a day it haunts you. And we can all think of those pictures because they do last forever.
What's yours then, Harriet? Have you got one of your own?
Oh, I had one when I was just about to be sacked from the cabinet and I was under massive pressure. And I did an interview and the photographer asked me to stand on the balcony outside my office in Whitehall. And I stood on the balcony, and then, of course, the catchline was that I was going to jump. Is she going to jump or is she going to be pushed? If you stand underneath an exit sign, you're going to be fired. If you eat a bacon sandwich like Ed Miliband did, that's forever and a day.
Nobody eats a sandwich like Ed Miliband did.
Well,
that was the reason for it.
So, it might be, they said, just put your head down on your hands. So anyway, last time I saw David Lammy, he looked very perky very perky indeed, and didn't seem to have his head in his hands. So I think that's probably a false representation.
You can sort of see that he's might be talking animatedly, and then, or they're having a joke, and sometimes you do that, and you put he might
be like. But in my lifetime of trying to avoid bad photos, I never used to do a sort of kiss on the cheek with Gordon Brown or Tony Blair, because there's something about the way camera angles can catch you where you look as though you're going in for a full-on mouth-open snog. So you'd have to sort of stand back as they come in towards you and you jump out the way.
Well, I enjoyed that. I don't know. I mean, God, you've got a lot to deal with, you guys, haven't you, when you're doing this politicking?
Nobody makes you put a name in a ballot paper. Don't feel sorry for us.
Exactly. I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, you could absolutely do like a top 10 of like bad political photos that have ever been taken, whether that's bacon sandwiches or, Kinnock falling into the sea or whatever. But another top 10 that has hit your mobile phones recently, oh yes, look at that link, is Spotify, Spotify Unwrapped. Thank you, everybody that put Electoral Dysfunction as your number one podcast. We've done really well this year, and it is only because of you, so thank you so, so much.
Yeah, thank you. It was, I loved getting my Spotify Unwrapped. And thank you to all of you who hit me up on Instagram with your top fives, and then I shared a few of them. Also, we get extra stats, which I love too. And it turns out that there is a very, very clear correlation between electoral dysfunction listeners and Taylor Swift fans. So I love this. And actually, I turned out to be in the top 2% of the world in terms of Taylor Swift on Spotify. That means I listen to a lot. I know. I got a special message from Taylor Swift because I'm a super fan. She's like, I love you guys. I'm like, I love you too. And then the other thing that was amazing was my listening age is 21 years old.
Oh,
that's my
you.
listening age, because basically all I listened to all year was Taylor Swift, Beyonce, with a sprinkling of Tori Amos. Don't even ask me.
My listening age must be about 9, because I always listen to K-pop Demon Hunters.
Okay,
right. I mean, that's the revelation of the day.
Yeah, expand,
Love a bit of the
please.
K-pop Demon Hunters.
Expand, please.
Well, it's this film. It's an album that came out of a film, and it's like on Netflix, and it is the most successful film Netflix has ever done, and it's like an animated. Korean kind of girl band that hunts down a boy band, and the boy bands are all demons that can suck the soul of their audience, and they fight over the audience, and there's really catchy pop tunes, and every child in the world is treats it like catnip.
Oh, I love this. Well, talking about K-pop demons, I'm sure there's a segue from that into politics, but I don't know what it is. Ruth, do you want to help me out again?
Yeah, well, in terms of something of the night about them, we all remember Michael Howard, but we've moved on from there. So let's talk about the current leader of the opposition and Prime Minister, and the difficulty that the Chancellor's been getting into, and whether there's something that goes bump in the night about those figures from the budget.
Oh my gosh,
she's
on fire today.
Segue
I'm on my second can of Diet Coke already this morning.
Don't give her 3, she'll be unstoppable. Now the Chancellor's budget's done, you might be wondering what it means for you, your family and your future. You won't be alone. There's lots to understand about how what she announced could impact your finances. If you're feeling like you need some help, know that St James's Place has a national community of advisors that offer one-to-one financial advice. A St James's Place financial advisor can help you with your plan for the future, empowering you to make confident choices around your family finances. Visit sjp.co.uk to find your one-to-one financial advisor. St James's Place representatives represent only St James's Place Wealth Management plc, which is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. SJP approved 21st of October 2025. For me as a journalist, it's been a really interesting week, and I want to unpack a bit why, because I think there's quite a lot going on here about whether the government are misleading people, how, to be fair to those in number 10 and those in number 11, that they will think that they weren't in some ways, and both things in different ways can be right at the same time, depending on perception is everything, isn't it? So we're going to talk a bit about that. And as we said when we first started the pod, we want to talk a bit about how the sausage is made and what's going on. So we're going to do a little bit of that. And it matters, of course, because this is about how the country's been run. It's about trust in politics, and particularly in this Labour government. And can they begin to try and improve on all of this? So we're going to do a bit on that.
Okay, so let's go back to the beginning of all of this and the budget briefing, the counter briefing, everything that's happened, because I'm not going to lie, this is complicated and it's quite confusing. And part of what's arisen over the last week is about when the government told the public things, what they told them, how much they told them, but also was when did the government know certain aspects that they divulged to the public and certain aspects that they didn't. And part of what the government is told and when it knows something is because it gets given an analysis by that OBR, which we've heard a lot of in the last week, the Office for Budget Responsibility, which is the fiscal watchdog. So they're in charge of checking the public finances and modelling and doing all of that kind of heavy lifting. And some of the charges that are being laid at the Chancellor and at the Prime Minister's door is that they've been gaslighting the public. In fact, we had a question last week from Justin, one of our listeners, that was saying, are we being gaslit over tax rises? Harriet said no, I said yes. But that was about whether, is it a tax rise even though it's not an income tax increase? This has gone beyond that now. This is about the need for it, why it was needed, whether it's political choices or whether they were told there was a big hole or not. So, Beth, what's really interesting to me is a lot of this is based around what was briefed to journalists and then the backpedaling that's been done this week being done to the same journalists saying, no, but we didn't really say that, we said something else. And I think as somebody that's been part of all of these briefings, it would be really good to fill us in on how you see this having developed from your side of the kind of microphone.
From the outset, I think it's really important for me to clearly state, because I need to reflect, what people say to me, that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor will feel that they did not mislead the public. And you have seen them on camera saying that repeatedly. And I was in no doubt at the press conference on Monday when I asked the Prime Minister about this, that he was really clear to me that he did not think he misled anyone. And that's what he said. But the reason that there is even a question, it is pretty messy, as Ruth was saying, and it's more convoluted. And I think it's also right that people can feel misled and other people can feel that they're not misleading. And I actually think in this case, both positions might be quite justified, which is why it's a bit complicated and messy. But isn't life always grey, not black and white?
There's a number of reasons why all of this is important. Firstly, because it's the issue of whether people feel they can trust the government or whether they feel the government is pulling the wool over their eyes and misleading them. Secondly, the allegation that this harmed the economy, all this speculation, because people actually didn't spend their money in this important time in the run-up to Christmas because they were wondering what was going to happen because of all the speculation. And also the suggestion that some people cashed in their pensions because they were trying to avoid a future tax rise in the budget, which didn't actually happen, and therefore they disadvantaged themselves. So there's an issue about trust and real-world consequences and a sense of breach in the relations between the media and the government, with the government feeling that the media is putting out, false allegations that they've done misleading, and the media feeling that they've been misled. So we need you, Beth, to explain why relations have soured so much.
Yeah, okay. That was a really good way of putting it, actually, as well. I think the best thing to do is we'll kick off with the question I put to the PM about this, and then I've got a timeline, and I'm going to run you through it because I think actually the timeline helps explain where we are, and then we can all unpack that a bit. We found out from the Office of Budget Responsibility that the Chancellor, with your backing, misled the public on November the 4th when she warned about a black hole in the public finances without telling us the second bit, that higher than expected tax receipts meant the economy was in a much healthier position than the Chancellor publicly suggested to all of us and to the country. How do you respond to that as Prime Minister?
There was no misleading. And I simply don't accept, and I was receiving the numbers, that being told that the OBR productivity review means you've got £16 billion less than you would otherwise have had, shows that you've got an easy starting point. But we started the process with significantly less than we would otherwise have had. Of course, there are other figures in this, but there's no pretending that that's a good starting point for a government. It isn't. And there's no to suggest that a government that is saying that's not a good starting point is misleading. It is wrong, in my view.
The starting point of this is he's talking about this productivity review. This is the Office of Budget Responsibility. They did a productivity review into the long-term health of the UK economy. And this is what you base financial forecasting on. growth forecasts on. And what they did was they downgraded productivity growth. Basically, the downgrade to productivity knocked money off what the Chancellor thought she had to play with, because they were predicting that the economy hadn't grown and wouldn't grow as fast as they had expected it to. So they're saying we've got 16 billion less in our forecast than we thought we had to play with. So that's the starting point. And then on October the 31st, the OBR gives the Chancellor the final forecast. And it turns out that there has been that productivity downgrade, but that has been offset by higher than expected tax receipts. And basically the Chancellor has a surplus in the public finances, but she also has to pay for welfare spending, and she also wants to build up her fiscal headroom, and that's where the tax rises are going to come in. Now, on November the 4th, she then does that speech in Downing Street, number 9, where she implies an income tax rise is coming.
If we are to build the future of Britain together, we will all have to contribute to that effort. Each of us must do our bit for the security of our country and the brightness of its future.
What we are not told is that there are higher than expected tax receipts. And actually, that means that although there has been this productivity downgrade, that the black hole has been offset in terms of the productivity downgrade with increased tax receipts. We are not told that. On November the 14th, the Financial Times gets a leak, and we reported this, that the government have reversed on the income tax rise. We are told that the reason for that is because economic forecasts have improved and the fiscal deterioration isn't as bad as the government thought. There's an implication to journalists that the reason that the government reversed on the income tax rise was somehow new information had come to them in terms of the forecast, which meant the public finances were in a better shape. And that wasn't true. The forecast had not changed since October the 31st. So basically, we are told the decision to reverse on the income tax rise has nothing to do with politics. It's all about the economic forecasts, but the economic forecasts haven't changed. And so that's why journalists were feeling misled. And then on November the 28th, the OBR actually sent a letter to the Treasury Select Committee demonstrating there had been no fiscal black hole, and basically set out the facts about the evolution of these forecasts, which I've just gone through with you, because of, quote, the unusual volume of speculation of the subject prior to budget day.
I fully accept that at the point the government stood up and said, the OBR's come back and said that there's been a productivity downgrade and that's going to cost us X amount of money. Fully accept that. That's what the OBR said. That's what the government said. That is, in all intents and purposes, true. But the next part of what they said was, and because of this downgrade, we're going to have to look at some really pretty tough measures within our budget, like raising taxes. And then, as we all said on the programme, it turns out that breaking your manifesto promise and being the first government in 50 years to raise income tax isn't politically very viable. So what they then said was, we've had new information that tax receipts are up, and therefore we don't need to do it anymore. There was no new information. They knew at the very first point that they said this, that yes, productivity was down a bit, but the wages were up, inflation was up, tax receipts were all up. That was all in the same report. They knew that at the time of this speech. They did only tell us half of the story, and they told it in a way which wasn't just about leading us to believe something. When they were backtracking on it, that's where I think the lie came.
David Miles, who was a board member of the Office of Budget Responsibility, appeared at the Select Committee, the Treasury Select Committee this week, because he said, and I think we do need to acknowledge this, he said it isn't misleading for the Chancellor to say the state of the public finances were fragile. And the reason he was saying that was because once you add in the productivity downgrade and the increased tax receipts, the black hole is actually a surplus of 4 billion quid, but that is not enough for the Chancellor. Against what the forecasts were doing, the Chancellor was going to have to take decisions about whether she increased taxes or spending, my interpretation is there is a lot of heavy lifting, blame in the productivity downgrade on all of the decisions that the Labour government make, because then they can kind of put it on the last lot. And actually, the reason that they are raising taxes by another 26 billion quid is not because of the productivity downgrade, or not just because of that. It's because of their decisions on reversing welfare cuts, their decisions on the two-child benefit cap, and the Chancellor's decision to lift her headroom to about 20 billion because she has been so exposed. For me, this was about Labour choices. And the way it was framed around this fiscal black hole, when actually that black hole wasn't there. I'm not saying there wasn't a productivity hit, but it was offset. That's why I think journalists feel misled. And I felt I was told half a story. And you saw me put that directly to the Prime Minister.
I think there's a number of things going on here. But if you look at the speech that she made at that press conference, which has been much jeered at as the Cheerios press conference because it was at breakfast time and been described as unprecedented. But I think she was perfectly entitled to there on the 4th of November, set the context in which she was going to be making her budget decisions, which were going to be announced on the 26th of November. And she basically said, we inherited difficult times, a stagnant economy, all that sort of thing. But my decisions are going to be based on protecting public services in the NHS. We're not going to have austerity. I'm going to be worried about the cost of living and trying to protect people. And I want to have fiscal stability because instability is bad for the economy. And so everyone is going to have to contribute a bit more. That's what she said on the 4th of November in public, in a press conference, completely open. Then when you fast forward to the budget on the 26th of November, that's exactly what she did. But the difficulty is that in between time, there was all this briefing. And that's where they've got into trouble. And there's two things about this briefing. It's opaque because they say different things to different journalists and nothing to some journalists. And it's not open to challenge because it's all said privately and off the record. And there's been a bit of a pattern of this government getting into problems about briefings. I think there's a pattern of the government not being good at explaining why they're doing things, because the discussion has become not what did they do and whether it was right for them to do that. The discussion has been what was the reason they did it? And if they gave one reason and that wasn't the reason, then that undermines trust. So, for example, with the winter fuel allowance, when they changed that and did their U-turn and gave more pensioners the winter fuel allowance, they said it was because there was an improvement in the economy. And actually, everybody knows that it was because the public were furious and wouldn't wear it. And I think what they should have said is the public are furious and won't wear it, and we're able to do it because we've got a bit of an improvement in the economy. But just to say, oh, well, it's improvement in the economy, it just feels like it's not the full explanation. And in relation to the two-child benefit cap, which they also changed in the budget, and they got rid of the two-child benefit cap, they said it's because we've been able to get some money from gambling tax to do this. But actually, it's evident that it was a big ask from the Parliamentary Labour Party that we should get rid of the child benefit cap. Yeah. And it wasn't just that they found an opportunity of doing a gambling tax. And there's nothing ignoble about having political stability and leading with compromise with your party in Parliament. There's a whole, I could go on. There's so many examples of where they've changed things, and I think they've changed them in the right way, but they haven't done the full explanation. And then the argument has become not was the change a good change, but actually how you're explaining it.
I actually think that Harriet's onto something, but I would take it even a step further. So they have a lack of confidence of telling the story of why they want to do something. Yeah. I would think that it is perfectly acceptable if the Chancellor wants to tell the country and be honest with the country and with voters to say, look, in terms of this budget, look, we're only going to have headroom of 4.2 billion. Now, that sounds like a lot of money, but it's not enough. We need to have a bit of savings. And that's why we're going to do this. I think that's what she did say in her speech on November the 4th. That's exactly what she said. No, she didn't, because the whole point of the briefing that she had when she only had 4.2 billion headroom was to say, because of that, we're going to have to raise income tax when it became politically unpalatable. Just don't lie about why you're doing stuff.
I think the issue around all of this is that there is a lack of transparency about why they are taking the decisions they're taking, because what they're trying to do is constantly blame it on external reasons instead of just taking ownership of what they're doing. And at the heart of it, I think it's a chancellor that doesn't want to admit that she's adding 10 billion quid to welfare. So it's easier to focus the decision making on a productivity downgrade than on Labour choices. That the fact that they take decisions, and we all know why they're taking the decisions, and the public know why they're taking the decisions. And this is where I get wound up, because it treats people like they don't understand what's going on. And if the public can see that the government have reversed on winter fuel allowance because it's really pissed people off, that's what they see. Or if they can see that they've had to partly raise taxes because they can't get welfare reform through the Commons, that is what they see. And you can stand up as a Prime Minister or a Chancellor and tell them something else. Oh no, it's about the Tories and the productivity downgrade and it's nothing to do with Usgov, and people won't believe you. I think you're both spot on, which is they are taking decisions, but they're communicating in a way that is disingenuous. And then the public are mistrustful of them. And I go back to the kind of principles of what they were trying to get elected on. And the whole thing about Starmer was change. And it wasn't just about changing how the country was run. It was also about changing how politics was done.
This leads us so nicely to a question we've had in from a listener. Her name's Lorna. She says, do you think the media are too hard on Labour? I do think they're making some mistakes and could have done some things differently, but I feel the media is much harder on Labour versus others, and that this impacts how the population see the Labour Party. The media operate in a way to bring them down and never really focus on the achievements in a tough area or really scrutinising policy and the other parties in the same way.
I think it is fair to say that there is a kind of polarisation within print media where there are some more right-wing conservative supporting papers that give Labour a hard time. Equally, they have the Mirror and the Guardian that don't give them as hard a time, that they are traditionally Labour supporting newspapers. I think the thing I would say about it, because I've been getting a bit of this personally myself on social media, because what I see is I've tried to hold people to account. All I can do is speak for myself, and what I try and do is I try and give everyone as equally a harder time. And the way what I'm there to do is I'm there to try and relay what I think the public, what people talk to me about, and I get to get in front of these people to ask them and put to them, and I feel that a job of a journalist is to give each party as robust a scrutiny as possible, because all of them might be running the country. And when they are running the country, you hope that they've been put through their paces. I think the issue with all of this at the moment is, as Ruth has been saying, and I think, Harriet, as you've acknowledged, that there's a bit of skullduggery going on here in which things are being briefed out. Framing is happening that is not necessarily accurate. And crucially, regardless of what they say in briefings off the record, etc., Harriet, you hit the nail on the head. They're taking decisions because of political reasons, and then they're pretending that they're doing it for different reasons. And that's just dishonest. And regardless of what I ask them as a journalist, the public can see it.
I think the reason why it really matters and why this question was really important from Lorna is because it goes to the question of the trust that people have in the government. And you now get into a situation which is accelerating a trend that there's been of people accusing people of lying. And lying is about dishonesty, where you actually are deliberately misleading somebody. Everybody flinging around accusations that everybody's lying is a very dangerous trend to go down. To be fair, you didn't, Beth. You talked about misleading. Chris Mason talked about misleading. Well, but also, you see, but some of the accusations from like the print media is about lying. And I think that it's too easy for people to accuse people of lying. And I think that what the government has got to do is get a grip on this and recognise that this trust issue is very important indeed, and sort out their relationships with the in good faith broadcast media of which you, Beth, are obviously a shining example. And for you to be talking in the way that you are tells me there's a problem that the government need to sort out.
I'd like to say something as the resident Tory on the podcast that might surprise Lorna, who asks if Labour are getting a harder time than the other parties. I think Labour are getting more scrutiny than the other parties from the media, and that's broadcasters as well as newspapers. But I think it's because they're the government, not because they're Labour. And I think the governments always get more scrutiny than the opposition parties. I think that parties that have been in opposition for a long time and then come into government often struggle with how different it is and the levels of scrutiny. And I think that's sometimes why you see historical stuff that's never been dug up before suddenly coming to light when you're a minister in charge of a department, because you suddenly start looking at the people who are in charge of billions of pounds, who are in charge of people's lives, of the services that are how they're looked after, how their kids are educated, how their health is looked after. So yes, the press are being quite hard on Labour at the moment. They're making sure that they are being thoroughly scrutinised, but that's not out of badness, and it's not out of malice, and it's not out of naughtiness. It's because they are the government and they are going beyond what they said they would do, and it is their job to have a look about how that's justified. That's all for this week. Keep your Christmas questions coming in. We've had some crackers already out there, but remember, on Christmas Day we'll be in your feeds with a very special episode answering everything that you want answered.
And the number to WhatsApp is 07934 200 444, or you can always email us at electoraldysfunction@sky.uk.
And we'll be back next week. Remember to follow us wherever you get your podcast, and we'll be there as soon as the episode is published.
Goodbye.
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 Financial advice from St James's Place sponsors Electoral Dysfunction.